Herkese merhabalar. Yanımda Profesör Doktor Richard Bagozzi var. Sosyal bilimlerle uğraşıp da zaten bilmeyen çok azdır kendisini. Çok iyi bir kariyeri. MIT, Stanford, Rice, Berkeley, Michigan. Tüm bu üniversitelerde geçen çok iyi bir kariyer. 150 bin üzerinde atıf. İnanılmaz iyi dergilerde basılmış makaleler. Bunları niye söylüyorum? Bunları şundan dolayı söylüyorum. Biraz sonra konuşacağımız konular hocamızın bakış açısıyla iyi bir araştırmacı nasıl olur, iyi bir araştırmacı iyi üniversiteden nasıl kabul alır. Dolayısıyla maalesef bu dünyada bir reklam yapılması gerekiyor. Bilmeyen arkadaşlarımız için bu videoyu izlemek gerçekten bence önemli. Böyle kariyere sahip birisi, bu kadar görmüş geçirmiş birisinin vereceği tavsiyelerin ben çok önemli olduğunu düşünüyorum. Bu videonun var olması sebebi de zaten bu. Bu nedenle başlangıçta bunlara değinmek istedim. Geleceğin akademisyen olacak arkadaşlarımız ve günümüzde ki çok değerli hocalarımız için bir ileri seviyeye geçebilmemiz, ülkemizde birazcık daha ileriye taşıyabilmemiz açısından bence buradaki bilgiler çok önemli. Umut ediyorum ki faydalı bir video olur. Hello again, Professor Bagozzi. Again, I'm so glad to have you here, and we can talk about today about the application processes for the PhD program. So you've been a professor for 45 years in the best university on the world. So what do you think about what kind of students have better chance to get accepted for the PhD programs in the good universities from the good universities that they can?
In the U.S. mostly, you're thinking too, because it's different in different parts of the world, and I've over time I've become aware of the systems in other parts of the world, which has similarities and differences. And I've sat on many dissertations at other universities, in multiple universities in Italy and Germany and Norway and the Netherlands and Denmark and France, Korea, Malaysia, universities there, and New Zealand and Australia. There's a lot of similarities and differences, but even within a country or a system, the process can differ. Most faculty don't have any direct influence on who gets admitted, like at Michigan. There's a 3-person committee that gets appointed each year, and it's often changed every year or two. So those 3 people are reading all the applicants, and they're making recommendations. And then those recommendations that they make, because they narrow down the people who could be accepted to a smaller set. And in our system, we invite out, we can only admit 2 or 3 people, sometimes only 1, but 2 or 3. But we might invite out 10 or 12 to come for a visit, to meet all the faculty that they want to meet, and have dinner with us, and so we get to know them, and before a final decision is made. But the 3-person committee still has the most input on that process. And those of us that would have met the 12 people or so could make comments and add to that, so we have some input. But that's the process. It's not a one-on-one. It's not like sometimes we get applicants, I get contacted directly, that someone thinks that I have the power to admit them. And unfortunately I don't. I wished I did sometimes, and I don't know if they believe me, but I try to explain to them what the system is. It's a relatively transparent system, very competitive. We have about 70 to 80 applicants for 2 or 3 openings. And those 70 or 80 applicants, almost all of them are qualified. So for us, it's a really difficult decision to figure out who to admit. And so we make a lot of mistakes. Many people we don't admit who would have done just very well. And some that we admit maybe wouldn't have done as well as those, and we don't know usually exactly. So in the past, applicants didn't know what research was about. It may sound strange, but when I applied to the doctoral program in 1971, 72, I really didn't understand what research was. You know, I knew the common sense meaning, the dictionary meaning of research. I had worked for an organization that did research, did basic and applied research, but I still didn't really know what it was, what it means. And when you fill out an application and do a personal statement, sometimes some schools you'd have to even do the kind of research you might like to do nowadays, but back then that wasn't asked. So I didn't know, and most people applying didn't know what research was. And I look back and I don't know how they admitted us, you know. But it's changed now. So now it's so competitive and so more sophisticated, and that people applying know so much more than we did when we applied. If a person doesn't communicate that they know what research is, and even can describe the kind of research they might want to do, and maybe the people they might want to work with, more than just one or two on that faculty, they have a lower probability of getting in, being accepted. So you really have to think through and understand what research really is. A lot of universities, limited resources, and they see their mission as developing faculty members for other universities. And so that's a very narrow kind of career path. They don't see themselves as educating people for government work, research work in government, or think tanks, or individual corporations, for example, which hire PhDs. Most of the schools don't see that as their mission. So they're looking at the applicants, the written description of who they are and what they want to do, and letters of recommendation. And they're looking for evidence that the person knows about research and has a head start to begin with, right from the beginning, because nowadays to get a job you almost have to have a publication. That wasn't true when I went through the system, but now it's true. And to get a publication, you have to start doing research early, and so many people are pushed to do research from the first semester. So that's the system now. So what the evaluators are looking for are they're looking for always motivation. You know, how hard a person will work, why they're interested in doing what they're doing as a professor. They're looking at, of course, their analytical ability. They're looking if they can, it's not an absolute requirement, but they would like people who can get along with others, because a lot of the learning that goes on among students. I felt that when I was a doctoral student, I had to say I learned more from my fellow doctoral students than I did from the professors, and I learned a lot from the professors. But I learned more in different things and reinforcement because you spent more time with your fellow students.
The environment is also great.
Yeah, and to do that you have to be receptive, and you have to be able to speak with other students and not be a total loner. I always feel, though, on the other hand, that we have to make room for the person that is doesn't get along with other people sometimes. I think that's a good value system. But to the extent that people can get along with others, that'll help most people learn more and from each other. And so they look for those kind of things. Some universities want to assign an incoming student to a particular professor right from the beginning and work with that professor for a long time. I had applied when I was a doctoral student, even though as long ago as that was, nearly 50 years ago. But I had applied to Purdue University, and when they accepted me, they said, "You will be the research assistant for Frank Bass."
Assigned you.
Yeah, ahead of time. And he was a very eminent quantitative professor, and he had, I think he was the editor of Journal of Marketing Research at that time, and I think they said you would be the Journal of Marketing Research student scholarship, something like that. But I'd be working with him, probably doing some things on the journal too, I'm not sure. Because I didn't end up going there. But I'll use that as an example because some universities are more structured and more guiding right from the beginning. And that university a long time ago, I don't think anymore because the old professors have long retired and the system changed. They grew bigger than they were then. But they were very efficient on producing doctoral students in a very quick time, maybe 3 years even. And Don Lehman was a very well-known, still today, very productive, eminent professor at Columbia University. He graduated from there. And I think, I don't know for sure, because he never told me, but I think that the dissertation topics were relatively well-defined right from the beginning, that they told people what they would be working on, more or less. And that saved a lot of time. The person didn't have to go through a trial and error learning process of finding their own topic. This latter process, I believe, is better because to find your own topic, even though you make a lot of mistakes and it takes longer, there's a learning process that goes on in our minds, a kind of imprinting or structuring of our minds in a way that helps us be more original and more creative than if we are same person were given that same topic without having gone through that learning process and that struggle. But so some schools are like the latter, but most have drifted away from that because of the competitive system now. And most have become more structured and most have become narrower in the sense of working in the subpart, like in my field, marketing. In each area, there are many options. Yeah. In a number of years ago, people had to study both areas, and it wasn't often until later they chose which direction they were going and what special topic they were. Maybe today they're a little more focused. I just want to use that as an example, metaphor, because in marketing we have quantitative methods and we have behavioral. And both of those things are, nowadays, the die is cast when the student first enters. They want to know, are you going to be a behavioral person or a quantitative person? If that's the way the system is working, that means when you do your application, you have to communicate what you want to do and convince the quantitative people or the behavioral people that you want to do those things, you're prepared to do those things, you're motivated to do it, and it means you're not going to work in the other area. There's a trade-off there. And the gain is that you become more specialized, move a little faster, maybe get a publication earlier and get a job quicker in a competitive system. The drawback is you become too specialized or you're not broad enough and you miss some learning opportunities that could make you a better researcher. So nowadays the applicants have to be much more to know what they want to do, which area of the fields they want to be in. For marketing, it's either behavioral or quantitative typically. There are some people that are more managerial orientated and they may combine quantitative with managerial. The behavioral people don't usually do managerial. They could, and I think there's an opportunity there, but they tend not to. And it's the same in other fields nowadays, as they become a little more focused. But every university and every department or school is different. Some are much more narrow, and others are somewhat more broad. And as an applicant, you have to identify which program fits you best. And to do that, you have to read the catalogs and maybe contact somebody at the university, one or more professors, doctoral students that are currently there, former doctoral students or professors at other schools. I did some of this when I was deciding where to apply and also which schools to apply to for jobs when I graduated. You have to get a picture of the culture within the school you're going because there's big differences. what some people think are marketing at one university, another university has a different image of what marketing is. It seems surprising, but it is that way. They have different values, and what some universities think is good or valued, the other university thinks is bad and is not valued. It sounds strange, but that's the way it is. And if you apply to one place with valuing something they don't value, you're not going to get in. Unfortunately, I think having people with different values is a good thing. But the systems tend to become narrower and narrower and weed out differences, different value systems. Tend to, that's not a complete weeding out, of course. So you have to look at each school like an anthropologist. You have to study the faculty, what they're doing, what they have said, if you can get some things like that kind of information, the articles that they've written, what they have chosen to do, interview students that are there now, interview faculty that are there now, interview people who may have started there as a professor and left because they see things that others maybe don't want to talk about or don't recognize. So you have to get information from many, many different points of view and kind of absorb it like an anthropologist studies a culture. Because every school has its own culture. And the only way to learn the culture is to read everything that's been written by them. And it used to be the catalog. I remember reading every catalog and thinking that, because I had, before I entered the doctoral program, I spent a lot of time, and studying anthropology. And I pretended that I'm an anthropologist reading these catalogs and I want to see what their values are that are hidden between the words they're using. I could only do that a little bit, of course, but it was really valuable. It really helped me pick the schools and pick the ones I was accepted to. And the same thing for the jobs I applied to later.
Yeah, as you mentioned, another problem is for our time is the publishing. It's time for the publish or perish time. So most of the PhD students started to publish in their first term, and even though they are looking for the master students to publish something before applying the PhD. So maybe we can talk about how do you find your research questions? How do you find those interesting ones? And do you have any suggestions for the people who are doing their PhDs?
Well, let me first say that I think, just personally, there is an overemphasis on publishing too early. Because in order to do that, people give up taking certain courses, trying certain topics that never work, but it takes time to go through that process, and you learn a new subject matter a certain distance before you learn that you're not going to do it or it won't work. There's a benefit in doing that. So I think there's an overemphasis on publishing too early that people miss out on deepening their knowledge, and not just broadening it, but deepening it in ways that aren't exactly the narrow way that they're doing. So I think that's a big mistake, but that's what almost all the systems are doing now, and all the faculty are pushing people to do, and that's what students are seeing as the way to get a job, because the competitive system has selected people that have publications early. But I really believe a person should resist that as much as they can, to get as deep and broad of training in other areas as they can that could cross-fertilize the area that you're interested in, or prepares you to work with people from those other areas that you wouldn't be prepared to work with when you do graduate. But I think it makes a person a better researcher in the long run. And also, one of the problems I see is that this is not maybe everybody, of course, it's just some people, were kind of misled and became so narrow that once they got on a job, and it takes a lot of time to do well as teaching, service, research, family, everything is so demanding that a lot of people who were trained too narrowly have a hard time developing new topics for research after they publish something from the dissertation. Mm-hmm. So it's best, I think, to develop your own dissertation, not to be handed a topic, speaking idealistically. It's best to have a broader and deeper education in other areas added to what you're doing, and not to get overly involved or in the beginning at publishing too early, sacrificing those other things, because it allows you to have the wisdom and knowledge to see other topics to do research on, as well as to work with other people who are doing the same, and learning from them and multiplying the effect. Now, in terms of topics, no matter what you do, whether you're narrow or broad, I find that they came from kind of non-purposefully by just reading. So I always had a long-run plan to read and read and read all the time, mm-hmm. and as much as I could, and not just to read. I had colleagues or faculty that would read a chapter in this book or part of this article. They would read in a piecemeal way that helped the project they were working on. And functionally, that did help the project they were working on. But for me, when I watched that, I felt that we're not giving a chance for the message to come through from the writer, from the book writer or the article writer. And I forced myself always, even when I thought it was useless or I wasn't interested in it or it wasn't well written, most of the time to finish the whole book or the whole article. And I think that was a good policy, because I could understand better the writers, what they were trying to tell us. And I learned other things that I would have missed. And that plus reading as much as you can read, in the area you're interested in, and in areas that are close by, and maybe some areas sometimes that are a little further away. There's a learning process that goes on, I think, that we're not aware of, that when it comes to me, the idea just comes out. I know what it is. I don't have to think about it. And the problem is there's not enough time. And if you take that long-run perspective and really apply yourself and do that reading, then the ideas, they come out. They're there. You see them.
Yeah. Eventually, like Newton seeing the apple. So
I remember I walked my children to the bus stop for school. Mm-hmm. They were very young, and we were living in an apartment until our home was built. And I remember going to the bus stop on both sides of the street. I said, "Well, what did we just pass?" And I would ask them, well, on one side of the street, all the trees were real healthy. Mm-hmm. They looked really well. On the other side of the street, they weren't growing very well. But, you walk every day and you're just thinking about this narrow goal of getting to the bus and going to school. You don't see what's around you. Mm-hmm. And I tried to use those kind of examples to open their minds to what's around them. Mm-hmm. So that it would be kind of automatic. They would see all those things, and that would, I don't know whether it would just relax them or make them aware of their surroundings and transfer to awareness at school of other things. But we have to do that, because when we're too narrowly goal-directed, which we have to be for many things, we have to be really focused. But our mindsets, our heuristics, our logical frameworks, our prejudices, all these things are part of our prefrontal cortex, mm-hmm. and they really guide in a way what we're focusing on, which we have to do for goals. Otherwise we won't choose our goals. But in terms of picking new ideas or being creative, we have to push those things aside as much as we can. We have to ignore them, because they are really like being in a prison. They're biasing us. Yeah. And I think that is partly what's behind, I'm not an expert in it, but the mindfulness tradition in many religions like Buddhism and parts of Hinduism, where people, the yogas, or they sit with their mm-hmm. legs crossed and relaxed, and they close their eyes, and they're told to focus on your breathing. focus on your breathing. Push everything else out of your mind. Focus on your breathing. That's their way of doing it. Other ways of doing meditation, you focus on other things. And I learned it more naturally. I wished I had been trained by a Buddhist monk or something. But when you do that, you're putting aside these frameworks that you've learned, which help you do things quick and well and are needed, but they keep you from focusing and immersing on emotions, your feelings, on a topic or something even, or being creative. And so I mean, this is kind of a vague general answer, but if you do those things over a long period of time, the ideas start coming automatically. Yeah. Now, I said reading, and it's very important to read. So, well, what do you read? And everybody has a different strategy. I had a colleague at Rice University who I respected greatly, Bob Westbrook. He's a graduate of University of Michigan, actually, a long time ago. He's near retirement age, I'm sure now. But he would try to read, and others did this too, every article in every issue of the major journals in marketing. I never did that, but he did that, and that worked for him, and it was very successful. And I think it gave him ideas because he could see what the problems were, what the opportunities are, what the knowledge was in marketing, and where the gaps were, etc. For me, I read in a much more broadly because I'm often spanning disciplines. Sometimes I'm working in another discipline, but sometimes I'm working at the boundary of 2 or 3 disciplines. And sometimes I bring something in consciously or unconsciously from another discipline. And for me, that works well. And philosophy was the major one that I like to read. But I read also in psychology and all these other fields, statistics and anthropology and sociology. But more focused on the ones in the beginning. But over a long period of time, I'm working in all of those areas. And sometimes they lead to nothing. But I think that's the cost we pay for discovering things that lead to something.
Yeah, that's right. That's totally right.
So that kind of the reading, and it seems obvious, but we're so busy, often we don't have time to read. It's really hard to get a topic and design a study and implement the study and get the data and analyze it and write it up and sit on committees and do our teaching and get home to the family and all the other things that are going on and lead a normal life. It's hard to do that, and it's easy to give up these discretionary things. For me, it's always been a pleasure to read, and I really enjoy it. And I do too much of it. Sometimes I get up in the morning, I get up at 4 or 5 in the morning, and I start reading. And I know that I should be doing something at 9 or 10 or 11, but I just keep reading anyway. And then other times it's shorter, etc. Carl Weick was a professor here in organization behaviors, retired for a number of years. And he was a very disciplined guy. And every morning he would get up and read for 4 hours. That was his plan, and he held to that every morning. I can't do that. I'm much more exploratory, and so sometimes I get up and read for 6 hours or 8 hours, and sometimes 2 only, or something like that. Everybody has to find their style, but it's very important to do the continuous reading. Part of it is self-renewal. We have to renew ourselves. Sometimes we just gain different perspectives because authors, especially in other fields, people look at things differently. The same thing that we look at, they look at through different values or different lenses or different experiences, different knowledge. That's where the ideas come from. But they get mixed in our brains in a way that's not organized or literal or logical. They reinforce each other and they combine, and sometimes we go to bed and they're combining. We wake up and things that we thought about the previous day, we have another way of looking at it, an insight. I think it's very important. Maybe I wasted too much time on this.
Yeah, it's totally.
But for me, that's where the ideas came from. But I can't put a finger on it and plan and say, that I that it's organized sequentially or serially this way and it will lead to that idea. It didn't do that. It was very nonlinear and through combinations of ideas. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in fact, this also includes another question that I was thinking to ask you a question that what should a researcher needs, what kind of values a researcher should need? But I think this is a kind of answer for that. Reading from a broad area and reading always without losing.
A big value is that seeing our profession or being a professor as a calling. That we're doing it in and of itself for itself because we love to do that, not because it will necessarily produce some ideas or papers or patents for people who are developing things that could be patented or something that could be useful quickly for a company or we should the value of doing it because we love to do it and really love to do it and we're doing it for its own sake. Our study, our research, our teaching for its own sake is very important, I think. And not because we have to do it or, obviously we have to, our teaching is scheduled for us. So we have to be there that day at that time and we should be prepared, which means we have to back up and be prepared and do the things for that. That's a different kind of structured things that's part of our life that we have to live with and work around. But the value of valuing what we're doing in and of itself, I think, is really important. That's what I mean by work as a calling, life as a calling as well, not just the work. Other kind of values, I think I mentioned, for me, long run. I always felt the long run is the most important, and I'm going to sacrifice the short-term things for the long run. That's always been my value, and it's even now when I don't have a long run to go, I find myself still thinking that way. The trade-off between long run rewards or successes versus instant gratification. From a young age, maybe as a boy, I can't even remember when, I always had that value that the long run is more important than the short run. And eating a piece of candy, which we didn't have that in our family, but eating something sweet or versus eating something that will lead to health and long run strength and building the muscles and the immune system. I mean, it was always in my mind. So the long run value is very important. Sacrifice, discipline, obviously too, but not too much discipline. Because to be creative, you have to have less structure. But on the other hand, another value, these things are all intention. I think you have to value solitude and being alone, because a lot of things that we do in academia are alone. We're writing things alone sometimes, and some things we have to do alone. But at the same time, we have to value working with other people too, maybe as part of a team. And so there's a tension there. So we have to value both solitude and working mutually with other people. I mean, most of the things I'm not thinking about when I'm doing it, but if I reflect on it, what other kind of values? There's always a value of sometimes a conflict between enjoyment and production. And so that's, for me, I love reading so much that sometimes I would do too much of it and giving up on producing. And after a while I said, well, I just can't keep doing this. I got to sit down and write this draft of this paper. Otherwise,
this is a really big problem for most of the scholars.
But I recognize it, but I don't get angry about it. I mean, I like doing both, and I get comfortable with and accept that I have to follow my heart sometimes, even though it has negative consequences for other things. And if and accepting those negative consequences when they should be accepted. Sometimes they shouldn't be. Sometimes I've hurt somebody or something like that, and I need to do better and not do that. So it's a kind of self-learning process. The self-regulation and is very important. We have to regulate our intentions and decisions and our desires all the time, which means we have to examine them and say, having this desire to do this, am I the kind of person that should have this desire or not? Or if I don't have a desire to do something that I should I ask myself, is this a desire I really should have, and do something about it? Is it the kind of person I want to be by doing this? This kind of self-regulation is, it's a lifetime ongoing thing that we have to do. It's to examine self that the ancient Greek philosophers talked about. We have to take time for that, and it's a skill. We have to do it and develop it and not avoid it.
Thank you.
Too much.
Thank you, Professor. I think all the information that you have given to us, it really have immense importance. I'm going to watch the recording more than one. There are lots of things that we can learn from you and from this recording for sure. I'm sure it's going to be really helpful for the audience too. Thank you again for being here with us.
Maybe another thing is not to overlearn things from people like me or what other people are saying. Now, this is, you started off introducing things in Turkish and so on, and there'll be Turkish people watching. And while you were speaking there, I remembered, when my first day in the doctoral program, one of my best friends was a Turkish man, Fuat Ferhat.
Fuat Ferhat. He's also very famous.
He went to Roberts College, I think, which is now Bosphorus University, maybe. But we became good friends, our families, and so sometimes my wife and I would babysit their Fuat, and Sena was his wife. She's has died. But Furkan and Feryal were the two of their children then. And my wife and I would babysit them a lot. We didn't have children yet. And so we did a lot of things with them and talked about school, and he and another doctoral student from India they were trying to write a book on Marxist marketing because the societies they came from, that was their values. And I really respected them immensely and learned a lot. But I remember when I first came into the doctoral program and I mentioned to Fuat, there was an old movie that I had seen from the 1930s that was very meaningful to me. And they were showing it on campus. So he went with us and we saw the movie. And he and I had many very similar values and same goals, and as much as a person from Turkey and America could have. But he saw the movie, and he, to use a figure of speech, he thought it was a piece of junk. It had no meaning to him. And it was a good lesson for me, because it told me, even as much as we shared in common, there were some things in our backgrounds that he didn't understand, in his background, and I didn't understand. And so a lot of the things that I said might not apply to a lot of people watching. I think some of them are universal, more or less, but have to be worked into your own needs and system. But we have such different backgrounds and needs, and I think we have to recognize that. And that's why I think don't put too much emphasis on what other people are saying.
Yes.
But always listen to what they say and try to understand what they say. But don't automatically accept it and try to conform to that, even if they're in an authority position, because they could be wrong for you, and you won't know that if you haven't gone through the process of discerning what they're saying and what does it really mean for you.
Yeah, but I still believe that. There are lots of things that we can learn from you and from this speech. Thank you for that interview. I really appreciate it. I can't find the real suitable word for that, but it's really valuable for me.
But thank you.
Thank you.
It was my pleasure.
Thank you.
My honor.
Thank you. And thank you to my wife also. She's with here also. She's helping for.
Thank you for all your ideas and
thank you.
And your tears.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
And your support.
And maybe doing my closing in Turkish. Umarım faydalı olmuştur sizler için. Açıkçası gerçekten yani çok büyük bir değer olduğunu düşünüyorum hocamızın. Hep bu kanalın var olması sebebi de biliyorsunuz hiçbir şekilde maddi bir getirisi yok. Tamam her ay bağışlıyoruz buranın gelirlerinde. Gerçekten birine fayda olmasın umduğum bir içerik. Lütfen bence her ne kadar hocamız mütevazi bir şekilde her söylediğimi dinlemeyin demese de bu konuşmadan bence geleceğin akademisyenleri, günümüzdeki akademisyenler için gerçekten çok büyük değerler var. Çok işe yarayabilecek şeyler var. Ülkemizde birazcık ileriye götürmek istiyorsak bunları uygulamamız gerekiyor. Umut ediyorum ki faydalı olur. Umut ediyorum ki en azından birkaç kişinin hayatına dokunur ve bir şeyleri değiştirebilir bu video. Hepinize çok teşekkürler izlediğiniz için. Görüşmek üzere. Hoşça kalın. Thank you again.